Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mark Prater podcast, where
For
our
more
aim is
videos
to
like
connect our
this, hit
global
subscribe
family
on
of
YouTube or
churches
by
with
email
our
at
executive director. Mark, last week we
markkprater.com.
talked about how we are a global family of churches. We are a multi-generational family of churches. And so we need to be able to invest in the next generation of leaders, and there's leadership development strategies that you guys are pursuing, the leadership team. But we are also a global family of churches, as we are constantly saying, and there's work to be done in the nations when it comes to leadership development. Can you give us an update about that?
That's right. What I mentioned last week in terms of how we're pursuing leadership development as a leadership team in investing in younger men who either are or will be serving in extra local roles. We're also thinking about that globally as well. And because we want to be a global multi-generational denomination, should God give us grace to do that. So Dave Taylor and I, our director of emerging nations, have been working on a leadership development program, for lack of a better term, for those pastors outside the United States. So the program I talked about last week was for guys in the States. We're going to have a parallel program for guys outside of the United States that Dave and I will lead through. And it's parallel in the sense Dave and I are thinking about two different groups, like two different groups I mentioned last week.
Right.
The first group would be guys who are clearly leaders in nations, who are either in Sovereign Grace or will be a part of Sovereign Grace. And it's clear that those men are going to help us to expand globally as a denomination over the next 5 to 8 years. So we want to gather them together and invest into them. And then a second group of either pastors in Sovereign Grace or pursuing partnership with Sovereign Grace might be a bit younger, maybe not as much leadership experience, but we believe those men will not only help us to expand globally as a denomination, but will serve in extra local roles as we expand globally. So Dave and I are putting together a list of names. I'm keying off him because he knows them best, and starting to talk about topics that we can, take those guys through. We're hoping to pull them together as soon as possible. That kind of hinges upon travel related to the COVID pandemic. If possible, we'd like to do that later this year. If that's not possible, as soon as we can in 2022, probably somewhere outside the States, so that they don't have to travel to the States, and I can go to them, so to speak. So we're really excited about that. And I wanted our pastors to be aware that we're thinking about leadership development, not only here in the States, but outside of the States as well.
I love hearing about how we are thinking about our global friends and not just development here in the States. So good news about leadership development and what we're pursuing in Sovereign Grace. But Mark, this call to develop leaders is in fact part of what Scripture commands the pastor to pursue. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and you find that right there in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, where Paul writes to Timothy, and he's really, it's a command for us as pastors. And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men. And then verse 3, who are able to teach others also. So it's just a command to pastors that we are responsible to develop future leaders in the church and develop future men for pastoral ministry. So we obviously feel that burden as a leadership team. I hope these two podcasts back to back will get you talking about it with your eldership, about what are you doing and what you can do to develop leaders, future leaders and future pastors that might be in your church.
That's great. And I also know going forward, there's even thinking about how to help us as pastors, talking with John Payne and the leadership team to help us in that work of equipping and developing men in our local context as well. So thank you, leadership team, for thinking about us in this way and developing the next generation of leaders. And thank you, Mark, for your thoughts. And to everyone else, thanks for joining us. We'll see you here soon. Bye for now.